Welcome to Resiliency, the podcast, the place to find stories, strategies, and inspiration on how to embrace change, overcome challenges, and redefine resilience in today's ever-evolving world. I am Jenn Quader, a global communications expert and CEO of a company called The Smart Agency, and I'm joined by the world's first Doctor of Resiliency and international business consultant, Dr. Kelly Culver. Our show brings together a diverse group of individuals who inspire, educate, and motivate our audience to find their own inner strength in everything from the minutiae of everyday life to world-altering problems. Now we want to share what they have learned to help everyone build their resilience, overcome hardships, positively impact their communities, and ultimately help the world at large. Now today we have a special show for you. We are welcoming an amazing woman as our guest, Miss Elizabeth Tobias. Elizabeth has over 30 years of experience in the arts and culture sector and 20 years of that in mental health, wellness, and personal transformation. She holds a Master of Arts in Psychology and a postgraduate professional diploma in Expressive Arts Therapy. She also holds certificates in mindfulness and yoga. She is the recipient of numerous awards, including a Learning Innovation Fellowship from the National Science Foundation, a Durfee ARC grant, and awards for her short documentary, Survivor, 98 Second Stories. Elizabeth is a TEDx speaker recognized around the world and also a highly experienced global arts and culture maker who specializes in creating consciousness-raising exhibits, programming, and events that inspire resiliency, creativity, communication, and connection. Please give me a hand in welcoming Miss Elizabeth Tobias.
I have a question for Elizabeth. You know, we are a global podcast. Jen is in LA. I'm in Canada, just outside Toronto at the moment. So I have a question for you, Elizabeth. Where in the world are you today?
Where in the world I am today is in the beautiful La Jolla, California.
Excellent. And you know, this podcast is all about resilience. So I'm curious, what does resilience mean to you?
Oh my God, we're starting with the easy question. Thanks. Starting soft. You know, there's so many ways to see resilience. And for me, for my journey, for my life, what resilience for me has been staying open. It's been trying new things and not getting stuck in one way of doing things. I have been very fortunate in my time on this earth to have discovered so many incredible resources, so many incredible communities and friends and groups that I have aligned with over the years. And so I feel that part of my resilience journey has been this accumulation of resources, of putting together different circles, different mindsets, different places I can go so that when I am stuck or unsure or not sure where to go next, that, you know, I have this wealth of places to turn. The other factor that has been so important, and this has taken me a long time to understand, is time. Time is resilience for me, because it's not obvious in the present moment that things are going to get better or that they're going to shift, that there will be a silver lining perhaps down the road. But I have learned that when I give it time and patience, that things really do work out and become clear, and that they do transform. So those are my two main points, are time and resources, accumulating resources.
Thank you. That is really, really, really insightful. And the thing about patience is an acquired skill. We are not born with patience. So congratulations on learning that at the moment. Now, Jen, you have the exciting part now.
I do. And actually, I want to say, Elizabeth, I just love what you just said. I think I resonate with that patience also. I'm someone who thinks that everything should have happened yesterday. And I've really had to work on that in my own resilience practice. But Elizabeth, I heard you say two things that are super important. The first is you talked about always trying new things. And I think that that's a really amazing way to build resilience. And the second thing you talked about was resources. And that really touches my heart because that's exactly what we want to do with this podcast is bring resources to people to help them understand. And one of the new things that you did recently is you gave a TEDx talk in Paris. And I want to ask you, had you ever given a TEDx before? What brought you to this big goal, Elizabeth?
Well, I think that giving a TEDx was always a dream of mine since the TEDx format was introduced, but I had no idea what I could possibly talk about or what I could share. And it didn't occur to me that I could talk about my life and my journey and myself. And it was interesting because I don't know how all of you relate to this, but from the time that I sort of threw my name in the hat to be part of this series, to the time I was chosen, from what I thought I was going to talk about to what I ended up talking about, completely transformed. And I found that the more personal that it became, that the more I shared about my story and my journey, the more it related in a larger sense, in a more universal sense. It wasn't giving facts. It wasn't giving a lecture like I would at a university. It was just being myself and telling my story and how I got to where I was. And so I'm so grateful and so honored for the opportunity to do it, and to myself for having the courage to take the call and to go for it. And I'm so glad that I did, because I grew so much in this process, and it was a great opportunity to meet you and to connect with other incredible new friends. So thank you.
We feel the same. I mean, I think, again, you touched on community, and one of the things that we all spoke about having worked together on that TEDx event in Paris is just what a connection we all felt. And Elizabeth, I think what you just talked about, which is sharing and being vulnerable with your own personal story, that is one of the most important tools of resilience, is being able to get open and share those things. So I would like to ask if you would be so kind as to allow our beautiful audience here at Resiliency, the podcast, to hear your TED Talk from Paris. Could we introduce the stage and allow you to share those stories with us today?
Oh, I would be so honored. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing my story. And I really hope it offers some resilience and hope and comfort to anybody who's listening.
We are really excited to let our audience and listeners hear this beautiful speech of yours. Audience, I do want to let you know and give you a bit of a trigger warning. As Elizabeth mentioned, she is being very open and vulnerable in this talk. And so you will hear some things that could be a trigger emotionally. And equally, you will hear some things that'll be really deep and inspiring. So with that, I would like to turn us over to Miss Elizabeth Tobias and her TEDx Talk.
When I was 5, I was a victim of sexual abuse by a family friend. I was so ashamed and humiliated by what happened to me that I didn't tell anybody about it for many years. Growing up, I only heard whispers of the unspeakable tragedies my Jewish grandparents endured. They were survivors of pogroms and the Holocaust and lost much of their families. They never spoke about what happened to them, and we weren't allowed to speak about it either. That was how they coped, by burying the traumas of their past. Those unspoken intergenerational traumas led to depression and mental illness. My mom was barely able to function, and when my parents' marriage ended in a bitter divorce, she was left a single mom of 3, overwhelmed and checked out. We were basically left to fend for ourselves, but as kids, we weren't prepared for that. My brother came out as a member of the LGBTQ community, and my mom had a hard time accepting his queer identity. My brother fell into depression and substance abuse. And 4 days before my 13th birthday, my brother died by suicide. When I lost my brother, a part of me died with him. I was so distraught. And of course, understandably, my birthday was ruined. I didn't have any kind of support. So I internalized my feelings and escaped into my imagination as my way of coping. This is when I unknowingly discovered the power of imagination, and it saved my life. For over 20 years, I have been creating community art experiences that help others find hope and healing through hardships and trauma. I'm an artist and an expressive arts therapist. In expressive arts, we awaken the senses and the imagination to help people create their path forward through life's challenges. In my sessions, we focus on exploration and play, whether it's with paint, clay, drums, or any art material. We just try new things to get out of your comfort zone. So we're going to try a little bit of this process together to help you awaken your imaginations. So please close your eyes and just take a comfortable breath. Please do a body scan. This means you're going to scan your body from the top of your head down to your toes, just to notice the sensations in your body right now. Now, keeping your eyes closed, tune into your imagination. When I say resilience, what do you see? Does it have a shape or color? Is it big or small? What do you hear? Is it loud or quiet? Now, holding on to that awareness, please bring your attention back to the room, open your eyes, and if it feels good for you, take a nice stretch. Resilience. Why are we talking about it? We're all grappling with complex existential challenges like the climate crisis, inequity, and unrest, leaving many of us feeling overwhelmed or confused. How do we thrive in times like this? According to the World Health Organization, 280 million people are struggling with depression. What can we do? Expressing yourself will help you create your path forward. When you engage your senses and your imagination, you discover new ways of doing things. You find your strengths and you cultivate new forms of resilience. Creating didn't just awaken my resilience. It really was the fabric that held me together. I grew up in California in the 1970s, and the arts were experimental. I was into events called happenings, where the art was about the process and not the product. Even as a kid, I understood that this was groovy and different and cool, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. It also helped me to imagine a way out of the turmoil of my life. I imagined myself living among creatives in an art factory like my idol, Andy Warhol. I even had ideas for experimental films, like an 8-hour movie of me just sleeping. By high school, I was determined to become an artist, and it was my favorite TV show, Dynasty, that inspired me to make the bold move to study in Paris. In August of 1986, I bought myself a one-way ticket on TWA to study at the American College in Paris. I will always remember the fear and excitement I felt as I boarded that flight alone to head out into the world. And I had never felt so alive. In Paris, I created my first art happenings. I was co-editor of the Paris Atlantic Journal of Poetry, and I organized poetry readings for expats and students like you in the Grand Salon on Avenue Bosquet. After so many years of being silent, I finally had the chance to tell my stories. And I learned that by holding a safe and courageous space, others could too. Fast forward to my 30s. I was living in Los Angeles, showing my work in galleries, and I was steadily building my art career. Along the way, I earned a master's in psychology and certificates in yoga and mindfulness. I became a new mom in 2008. Right as the global financial crisis hit. When my neighbors lost their home, I created the Cupcake Project. I traded homemade cupcakes for handwritten stories on index cards that became part of a growing community installation about economic disparity. What started on the streets of Los Angeles expanded to major art institutions over about 2 years. This was the first immersive project that I created that blended art, advocacy, and healing. Creating a space for people to be able to express their stories during such a difficult time offered them a sense of hope and comfort. My last project of this period was the Closet Disco Memorial, a tribute celebrating my brother's life and his legacy as a gay rights activist and beloved disco DJ. This piece also gave me the chance to tell my brother how much I loved him and missed him, and was my way of saying goodbye. This was a turning point for me. All of my experiences, the good and the bad, and everything I had created up to this point, helped me to see my purpose. I wanted to help people transform their lives through the arts. But I needed to understand the science behind art and healing. And this is what led me to my training in expressive arts therapy. Putting words to feelings can be really hard. But when you awaken your senses, you find a very gentle and natural way of getting in touch with your feelings and emotions. Creating helps you discover how to make something. When you awaken your imagination and you work in the art studio, you don't have a plan. You just begin creating. You discover how to make art. This is what we call poesis. So when you go into the art studio without a plan and you start creating, you just make one move and then another, figuring it out as you go. And believe it or not, this process actually helps you become more comfortable with change and uncertainty. Because in this way, you're just playing and having fun and not worrying about anything. Sometimes in life, we want quick fixes to problems, but that's not always possible. And we need to learn to be okay with that. I had to learn to be okay with that. My father died during the pandemic, and on the day of his funeral, I was diagnosed with incurable blood cancer. I really, there's no words. I was overwhelmed and in shock, and I did not know what to do. So I turned to my expressive arts community, and together we laughed and we cried and we danced and we drew. A word in one of the drawings spoke to me: patience. It reminded me to stay in the present moment, not worry about the future, and just to trust the creative process. When I did that, I realized that the strength I was looking for wasn't out there. It was in here. I connected with my true resilience. Thankfully, my condition is stable now. And I know that life's uncertainties will keep coming. When you immerse yourself in the creative process, you tune into your knowing and your wisdom. This is the foundation of our resilience. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. If that 5-year-old little girl could speak to me right now, she would say, "Happy birthday," because today, March 23rd, is my 57th birthday. All right, now, please come back to your breath and your imagination. When I say resilience, now, what do you see? What do you feel? What do you hear? If it could speak to you right now, what would it say? Never stop asking, never stop imagining, and never stop creating.
Elizabeth, thank you for sharing your TED Talk with us. I was reliving that with you. You know, it was like we were back in Paris together, the sensations, the full awareness, and your birthday. I'd forgotten all about your birthday. So we need to have another little happy celebration about your birthday. Just before we listened to your TED Talk, you said that you talked about the journey of how you created it, and that the more personal it became, the more impactful it became. And it was a journey for you. So I have a question. It's been a couple of months now since you gave your TED Talk. How has that changed your life?
I had such an incredible journey preparing for the TED Talk. I feel like the preparation for the TED Talk needs to become a TED Talk. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but that in itself was like, you know, such a personal journey, the highs and the lows and the doubt and the breakthroughs and the whole process. And so now that I have a couple of months since this has happened, something that makes me very happy about this podcast is that I do feel like I got to reclaim my birthday. And my birthday has been there's something called anniversary syndrome. And for people who have gone through a catastrophic loss or a loss, our nervous systems are attuned to that date within us, whether or not we're looking at a calendar or a clock. We know when this time of year approaches. And so since I was just such a young girl, my birthday has been such a sad time of year for me. And I noticed, like with my daughter, I didn't even think of this until I did this, prepared for this talk, that I have these crazy over-the-top birthday parties for my daughter every year. Like every year is like crazier than the next year. And I finally figured it out. It's like I've gotten to give her what got taken away from me as a young person. And so doing this talk on my birthday really meant everything to me. And it was reclaiming my joy, reclaiming my spirit, and reclaiming my life. And as much as I will always honor that time and always honor my brother's memory, which lives within me every single minute of the day, I got to have that back for myself. And that meant that really was the most transformational, one of the most transformational aspects of this journey for me.
What a beautiful story of resilience and self-directed resilience, you know, that you, and I like how in your talk, you talk about how you go in to create art and you don't have a plan, you just create. And I think that all of us, and it sounds like too, Elizabeth, as you approached this, you knew you were going to do a TEDx, but you didn't specifically have a plan. You allowed it to unfold, and how beautiful that it brought you back to that, to redefining your own birthday. Now, I want to dig a little bit more into that, because a lot of our listeners, they too have gone through challenges in their lives, and perhaps they have had difficulties finding that resilience. And something that struck me this time, Elizabeth, that I don't think I quite really took in when I first heard it, is that you were 13 years old, or really 12, about to be 13, when your brother took his own life. And I mean, the feeling around that, you know, I think is so deep and relatable. And then the fact that you then turned that around, even within your family circumstance at the time, and found that resilience. The question I want to frame for you and for our audience is, how has dealing with something that tragic at that critical time in your life, how has it taught you to face those other challenges you mentioned as a lesson to those who might be listening?
I thought a lot about this. You know, what happened to me as a result of this loss that I went through at such a young age? And, you know, I don't want to oversimplify it and overstate that it was just like, you know, boom, I got resilience. It was a real life journey that I went through. And there's been stages and phases of my life. But, you know, one thing that I can say is that for me, pain is a great motivator, and being uncomfortable and not finding my peace motivated me to look, to search, to find, to seek, to go and go and go, because there was a place inside of me that was not allowing me to enjoy my life. And there was a piece inside of me that was, that felt broken. And I really just, once I was older, a little bit older, in my 20s, I was really able to go on to a very profound healing journey that started with accidentally going to see, I don't want to cry. I cry a lot. But I went with a dear friend of mine. He invited me just to come along with him to a meditation. And, here it goes again. I'm crying.
Crying is always allowed on Resiliency, the podcast.
That's right. It's okay. It's okay.
But I went to go meet Alma, who's known as the hugging saint. And it was this like moment where I just got to see the love inside of me and the love in the world, and to see goodness on such a global scale. Like, it opened my consciousness in a way that I will never be able to describe what happened to me when I got my hug. But that was the beginning of the journey, where I just believed in love. And I saw that it was okay. I had to be so protective of myself for so long. And I had to be so tough and get through so much. So even though I had done great things, and I had gone to study in Paris, and I had accomplished wonderful things, and was starting to create art shows, I just did not feel the love inside of me. That was just too protected. So from that point forward, everything changed, and I just trusted. I trusted the world. I trusted life. I trusted things a little bit more. And I was able to open up on a soulful level, on a consciousness level, to go forward and to learn. And what I learned, that was by being of service, by giving back, by sharing with others who had gone through difficult experiences, who were going through difficult experiences, that was the most healing for me. And so I have had clients, I've had children that I've worked with who have lost their brothers, friends who've lost their brothers and to suicide, or family members, or situations that they've gone through. And I am not afraid of going into those spaces with them. I can meet people where they are with love and compassion, and people can share anything with me. And I understand, because I have been in those caves, and those dark caves where it doesn't feel like there's light. And I have seen through, and I don't mean to be corny or to say like cliche things, but to have the patience, to have the grace, and to step through that cave and to find the light and the love on the other side has just really inspired me to hold space for others who are going through the same thing.
There is something more powerful and better on the other side. And you've taken your experience and it's now become your superpower in how you're helping others on their journey. I love the fact that you were talking about the transformation that you yourself were able to go through on your birthday in Paris and reclaim that space in a way that isn't bad. It doesn't mean anything, anything negative in that way. It's just like you're able to celebrate in a different way and on a different level. What I'm struck by, which I find really interesting, and I'd like to hear a little more, and I think it comes out of your cupcake project. You use expression and imagination and curiosity to help people build their resilience, help them learn how to trust themselves and their inner voice. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that in and of itself helps you stay resilient?
Oh, thank you so much for asking that question. I love sharing about this process and this journey. I had shared a little bit about this awakening and this experience that I had when I met Amma, the hugging saint. And that got me on a wonderful path that led me to then my pursuit of my graduate degree in spiritual psychology. And then as part of my thesis, diving into mindfulness and yoga. Those were my thesis projects. And finding heart and soul in all of that. And yet something was missing. And I had to keep searching. I was a creative person. I was an artist. And those practices didn't allow me to practice art as part of the healing. And so my search continued for my way, my path. And it was through that openness and that desire to keep finding that I found expressive arts therapy and my training in that field. And that's when everything came together. And I was able to learn how to facilitate through the arts the healing and the profound transformation that people seek, whether they're just improving their day-to-day lives or helping strengthen their marriage or their families or going through a profound loss. I mostly work with children who have gone through loss or are in, very difficult situations. And I think that's because it resonates with me. Because as a child, I know what it was like to lose my innocence. I had been sexually abused when I was 5 years old. And so there was already a significant loss of innocence that I experienced from that. My mother struggled with mental illness and didn't take care of us. We had to take care of ourselves. And I struggled through that. And so working through the arts is so powerful, so transformational, so empowering, and yet so simple that people almost overlook how truly significant it is. Because the power of our imaginations, the power of our minds to create metaphor, to create stories, to imagine things, is our power to imagine new possibilities, to see things a new way from what we have gone through. And the other part of it is that when you've gone through hardships, you can tend to shut down. You don't feel good. You know, you might develop some somatic symptoms, like, I don't know, just feel a little shut down. And the physicality of the art making process, combined with the honesty and the vulnerability and the creativity, it is just so powerful. It is so powerful. And so I experienced a feeling of really coming home, of settling into something that felt like my home. And so for me, the arts have a power that I'd like to really share with as many people as I can, because it's within all of us, and you don't need a lot of money, and you don't need a guru, and you don't need you need to just trust yourself. You need some prompts, you need some exposure and some opportunities, but you can do this yourself and in community all over the world. It's available to everybody. And that's what I love about it. It's an equalizer. And it brings not just one person, but communities together.
Elizabeth, I'm so inspired by how you found your own resilience and now teach that resilience through this artistic expression. And something that really struck me both in your TEDx and also just now is that what you talked about through your experience, and I want to thank you for it, by the way, for being so vulnerable and open and telling us about going to visit the Hugging Saint, because those are moments of magic in life. And what I heard you say is that your love was too protected. You had buried it down. And I think that's something that from my reading and understanding that victims of sexual abuse, victims of other tragedies experience. And so what I want to point out as to our listeners who are thinking about resilience is that really there is kind of a two-pronged process. You have to heal yourself, and then you can help others. And I think that you being brave enough to go through that. And then I'm going to say one more thing, and that is you mentioned sitting in the discomfort. And I think that's such an important piece. And I wonder if we could just discuss that before we go into kind of a next question. If we could talk a little bit about the discomfort of life and how you sit in it. And my example would be, you know, when people take a cold plunge, they don't warm up the water first. And so how can we think about, as experts in resilience, the three of us, Jenn Quader, Dr. Kelly Culver, and Elizabeth Tobias, could we, talk a little bit about how sitting in discomfort, how taking those risks can bring us to our own healing, which can then open up the ability to be of service to others, as Elizabeth has through arts. What do you guys think?
As I said, I was very protected. I was very guarded with my authenticity for a long time. And once I had this nudge, this embrace, I was able to just open up some of those layers of protectiveness, and in that space sit in the discomfort. And again, in a whole new space. And I sat in that discomfort for quite a few years with going back again and again and again to many retreats and many events. And because I was able to be in that safe space, it just started the layers started to unpeel. Now, sitting in the discomfort, nobody likes it. I don't like it. You don't like it. Who likes it? It doesn't feel good. But what it did teach me was that patience and that understanding, because I did get to discover this love and this healing through this, that it's okay. It's going to be okay. Now, with that said, and to be responsible and conscientious as a practitioner, I am trained. I didn't just go to therapy. I wanted my degree. I wanted education. I wanted all of the resources available to me so that I understood on the most complex levels how this all worked, what I could do, and how I could start to learn to help others. So what I'm saying is, if you're feeling bad and going through something and making space for it, have support, have resources, have help. Please don't fall into a dark cave on your own. Stay open to having support and help and resources. And there are so many wonderful channels out there. And I am so thankful that I was able to find all of the resources that I did, and the friend groups and the circles that I was able to come into once this journey started for me. And so time and again, I've sat in the discomfort, and the discomfort keeps coming. It never stops. It never, ever stops. And it's not like I saw the light and now life is beautiful and rainbows and unicorns, because it is not. It is, I've had constant challenges, as we all have. And the one thing that I hold on to through all of it is knowing that it will get better, knowing that I will be okay. Let me frame that in a slightly different way. I have learned to know what I can control and what I can't control. And I do my very best to make all that. It's like the serenity prayer. And it is the wisdom to know the difference, to do everything I can to change the things I can. And that I am committed to every single day of my life. And then I also try to have the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so, it's these little things like from Buddhism or the serenity prayer or other little pearl drops that I really hold on to as messages. So when I'm going through the dark times, the hard times, the difficult times, I know I can change what I can, and I will learn to accept the things I can't.
You've almost developed your own model when Jen talks about, sitting in discomfort, and that takes courage. First of all, it takes courage to sit in the discomfort. And I think today a lot of people want a quick, easy, fast workaround from the discomfort, and that's why we're not growing and learning as effectively as we could. But you've got this model of what I'm hearing is this really amazing circle. I like triangles because they're really strong, but what I hear from you is a circle. And it's the what, so what, now what? And it's going around all the time. You're able to identify the what, the discomfort that comes in, the so what, I need to do something about it, and then now what, this is how I take that next step. And I keep those learnings with me, and I just continually grow in this wonderful, holistically circular way.
Yeah, thank you so much, because, this is not to be taken as any kind of critique of anybody else's path, but I know I want to just follow someone or follow something, to not have to take the steps myself to go forward. But I have found that for me, it's been the most empowering and enriching to have the courage to take the action steps myself, the now what. And that to me has been my path of resilience, is the now what. And to stay open to that, even when, oh my God, it was like, the list goes on of the challenges that have come since then. But I try to, with that creative mind, that creative mindset, create, like, okay, now what? What can I do next? What's possible? What can happen next? And stay open to that process.
It's a beautiful formula. And Dr. Kelly Culver, I love the circle. I think that's a beautiful visual to put together on it. Elizabeth, I remain inspired by you. And I think that those who might watch your career from afar would say, wow, look at that, resilience at every step. You've been in galleries, you've received national awards, you've had this successful artistic career in spite of difficulties and all because you've done this work. I now want to turn the spotlight for a minute to the big announcement that you gave to us in the TEDx, which is that you are now facing cancer. And I say that because I have a personal experience with cancer. My husband went through it, and we were very fortunate that he came through it. And then Dr. Kelly Culver on the call also has a personal experience with cancer through her husband as well. And so with that shared, I'm going to call it a demon, the shared demon that we all have to face in that. I think I want to ask Elizabeth, this is your new trial to face. What can you help people understand? Now our listeners have listened to you for a little bit. They know how you've come to your own resilience. As you face this new demon, what are you taking with you from your resilience journey? And how can other people handle it when faced with something like cancer?
Oh, thank you so much for bringing this up. I am still processing this, this reality that I'm facing. And on the one hand, I'm very fortunate that my cancer is the best case scenario of an incurable form of blood cancer. I lost my mother to a multiple myeloma, bone marrow cancer, when I was 29 years old. And when my mother passed away, I spent a few years being quite terrified that I would inherit the gene, that I would have it. And then it was interesting as my career and my life progressed, I genuinely forgot all about it. I just forgot. And then I started to not feel good. And I was having debilitating migraines and fatigue. And I just did not feel good. And I was going to doctor. I was proactive. I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. Let's figure it out. Come on. And I never got the answer. And then quite accidentally, when I was not looking for this information, I was donating blood for a friend of mine who was dying of cancer. And donating blood made me really sick. I wasn't okay. I called the doctor and they said, well, let's get some labs. And then I'm sorry to share it all, overshare. Then my dad died. While all of this is happening, literally, my father passed away. And then my platelets came back very high. The doctor told me to go repeat the test. I didn't know what it meant. So I went to repeat the test and I went off to go plan my father's funeral. And then on the day of his funeral, I'm getting a call from the doctor's office every 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I'm not answering the phone. I'm busy. And then I get in the car at the end of the day and I answered the call and she's like, well, you have to go see a hematologist. And I was like, oh my God, it was over. I thought, okay, I've learned so many tools and so many skills. I guess I have what I need to go through this, but it was too much even then. Even with all the skills I have, I was grieving my dad. I just wanted space for that. How could this happen on the same day? It felt like a weird final exam of consciousness. Oh God, what am I supposed to do with all of this shit?
Yes.
Agreed. A final exam. I dig it.
Yes.
So,
it's like, are you kidding me?
I mean, the irony, here's the weird irony. My nickname is E.T. and my cancer is called E.T. I'm like, that is so weird and me and creative to get a cancer of my name. Who does that?
And what a beautiful way to look at it. I mean, honestly, because even in just that statement, it's the same as my name. You've accepted it. You're looking at it. You're facing it. That's what makes a difference. You talked about kind of being down in the hole, like the 280 million people that suffer from depression, according to the World Health Organization. And everyone is on their level of that. But I think when faced with a diagnosis like this, the idea that you can look at it and say, all right, let me find the perspective through which I can look at it to bring it into my creative vehicles. What a way to change perspective and to build resilience. I do applaud that, Elizabeth.
Yeah, and of those 280 million people that are struggling with depression, it affects women more than men. So, and women, I don't know if that's just because maybe women might talk about it more or because of our caregiving roles, but that does express slightly more women on that scale. But, now I am a few years out. And I did not know if I would make it to Paris to do this talk. I didn't know if I could handle it physically. I lead a pretty normal life in most ways, and it's not life-threatening right now. I just have limited energy, or I get a lot of fatigue. And so doing this was like kicking ass. Like I got to go back to Paris and kick ass and get on a plane like I did when I was a teenager and be like, I'm alive. And going to Paris for me, for so many people, is like a place, a headquarters of aliveness for so many people. And it's my headquarters of aliveness too. And it was so full circle. And I just did it. And it made me feel so encouraged to keep going, because I'm like, am I going to barf on the plane? Am I going to get a migraine? Am I going to not be able to give my talk because I feel sick? Am I going to, I just did not know. And I paced myself. I didn't overdo it in Paris. And I rested a lot. And I'm so proud of myself. So my message is, please don't ever give up. Follow your heart, because it gives you strength. It gives you vitality, and it gives you energy to keep going. And it was like such a big challenge, and it gave me such a huge jolt of energy. Like it's energized me now for quite a while. I feel like it's a paying it forward for me. I feel energized for a long time now to keep going.
Elizabeth, that's absolutely amazing. And you've lifted us up onto a whole other plateau of high by relating, how you feel in that journey to Paris. And just, we can see the sparkle in your eyes. We can see the transformation on your face. Now, because we're in such a good place, we like to close our podcast with rapid fire questions, and they're fun. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. Number 1. What is your favorite movie or TV show that makes you feel resilient?
Oh, I absolutely love The Diving Bell and The Butterfly. And it is one of the most beautiful movies I've ever experienced in my life, based on the most beautiful story of resilience and transformation. I love it. And I recommend, please, if you haven't, read the book or watch the movie. It's a transformative experience.
Thank you, and I will. What's your favorite song that makes you resilient, or feel resilient, or do your happy dance?
I was born in the 60s. I'm a child of the 70s. I'm folksy at heart. Pete Seeger is such a wise man, and I love the song Turn, 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 performed by the Byrds, because it's from Ecclesiastes. It's from the Bible. I'm not into the Bible per se, but these are such wise words to just understand that there's a season for everything. There's a season for love, and a season for hate, and a season for joy, and it just helps me. And that's one of those simple verses of wisdom that I turn to when things just don't make sense. It's a season of change.
What's the last thing that made you laugh? Like laugh out loud, laugh.
Oh my God. I did the funniest thing. And I still, when I talk about it, it's so embarrassing. It's so humiliating, but it was so funny. I was part of a community interfaith Passover Seder. And, there's a lot of ritual foods on the Seder plate. And there was a food I'd never seen before. And I thought it was an appetizer. Even though I'm Jewish, I host Passovers. And I saw this and I thought it was an appetizer. and it represented the olive of peace, and I'd eaten it. And so when we got to this part in the Seder and I realized I ate the olive of peace, oh my God. I was.
That's another. Peace was already inside you, Elizabeth.
And that's what I said. I'm like, now the peace is within. But I was laughing, and then my whole table was laughing. We were crying, laughing. And we kind of disrupted the Seder a bit because we were having such a moment of like hysterical laughter. And that is one of the funniest things that has happened to me in a long time. It was like an episode of a sitcom where I was like, oh. And so, yes, I ate the olive of peace, but I hope that it only helps me to share more peace and love with the world.
Oh, well, we can do a really good riff on that. So, there's the quote from the Bible, the peace that passeth understanding. So that peace passed on to you some understanding when you ate that olive. I love that story. That's hilarious. Now we have the final question for you, which is, and this is the tricky one. What is one question you would like to leave behind for a future guest?
Well, I took that question. I hope this doesn't sound morbid, because this is like, to me, a really compelling question. What would be your epitaph? And you're talking about leaving with something. So I'm like, okay, what do you want to leave with? What is the message you would like to leave the earth with? So my question is, what would be your epitaph? If that is okay to ask. I hope it's not too weird, but
I think every business strategist says begin with the end in mind. So I think what a beautiful way to begin your life's purpose than with your end in mind. It's beautiful. Well, Elizabeth, we want to say thank you. Dr. Kelly Culver and I love doing this podcast, but we love it most because we get to interview people just like you who we already love and now love even a little bit more because you've been so open and so honest. And truly, we are inspired by your journey. We're inspired by your work. For all the listeners out there, you can find Elizabeth Tobias and you will enjoy everything you see. Take a look at her at elizabethtobiasarts.com and Elizabeth Tobias Arts on YouTube. Her work is beautiful, brilliant, and connected to resilience and community. You can also find her on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at Elizabeth Tobias. And then for Resiliency, the podcast, we ask that you please subscribe. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on resiliencythepodcast.com. And then you can find us all over socials. This is the place to find stories, strategies, and inspiration on embracing change, overcoming challenges, and redefining resilience in the ever-evolving world. Find me. I am Jenn Quader online at jennquader.com or at Jenn Quader on all the socials. And then find our illustrious doctor leader, Dr. Kelly Culver. She is available at culvergroup.ca. That's .ca because she is a Canadian resident. And then also you can find her at drkellyculver.com and then on LinkedIn and Instagram on Dr. Kelly Culver. As always, we thank you for listening. We bring love and resilience to you through our energy, and we hope you will tune in again to learn more about how you can stay resilient, stay strong, and enjoy your life. Much love.